Josh, have you ever brought a rogue deck that has a strong matchup against the top decks in a meta, or do you prefer to just play the top performing decks in a format? Well, it depends on how you look at it. There's definitely been formats where I would argue I've played just the top performing decks, but there's definitely been formats where I played more like sleeper picks, and it's definitely also been some of the formats where I've been very successful in. Like, I would argue Paleozoic in Zodiac format was not the top performing deck. That was not the meta deck. It was, in my opinion, it was the best deck, but it was definitely like Zodiac was like a tier 0 format. I don't think Paleo was rogue in the sense that it wasn't good, but it was a pretty damn good meta call, right? It was not what people expected, right? And I like to always be open about these sort of situations. The thing is, you're walking a very fine line. You're walking a very fine line when you're like, I try to not be a person that always does the same thing, right? Because always doing the same thing is hardly ever correct, right? You need to know when it's a good idea to bring a rogue deck, a sleeper deck, a meta call, whatever you want to call it. And you also need to understand when it's the best to just play the meta deck, right? And just learn it and build it as best as possible and just run with that, right? Because there are formats where the top tier decks are exploitable. There are formats where you can find a solid meta call, and you never want to be the person that always just plays meta, right? Because putting yourself into that position, or like being that person, is just, you're never going to be able to find a good solution to the meta. You're always just going to run the meta decks and try to perform as best as you can. But you also don't want to be the person that only wants to play rogue decks, right? You don't want to be a rogue Andy either. You want to be able to make a call and play a rogue deck when it's appropriate, when it's actually a good meta call. You don't want to play rogue just because you're the rogue player, right? You want to do it when it's actually good, right? And it's tough to find that. It's tough to find out, right? It's tough to do it, especially in short times like this one. Like, I would argue this is a very tough situation right now because YCS Dortmund, right? The meta decks are like, I would say, Unchained and Pearly. Those are the meta decks, right? There's like other decks are like Rescue Ace and Branded Chimera and whatnot. They're good decks. They're fine. They're definitely strong. But the most expected and most meta decks are definitely Unchained and Pearly. And so the toughest question for Dortmund is basically, do you want to just play one of those two? Because they are arguably the strongest decks right now. But of course, that will also mean everyone is gonna build their main deck or side deck against those decks. And they are also going to be very experienced, right? Everyone testing for Dortmund probably starts by testing against Unchained, testing against Pearly. Like, that's the things on everyone's mind, right? When you build your deck, when you test your deck, you have those decks in mind, right? And that is a disadvantage for people that play Unchained, right? It's a disadvantage, or like, it's definitely not an advantage anymore that people don't know your deck, right? That's just gone, right? And so what you want to figure out, is the deck good enough to still be the best deck regardless? And also, is even if you don't think Unchained is the best, like, or like that good anymore, is there anything that's better, right? And that's what we're trying to figure out.